All right, good evening, everyone. Glad to have you joining us, you here, them there. I know Jim Jerzik said it's been cutting in and out on Wednesdays. I haven't necessarily noticed it. Maybe it was on his end. But at any rate, we're talking about end time events, and 5 major end time events are in order: rapture, tribulation, second coming, millennial kingdom, and then the eternal state. And we've been talking about the timing of the rapture. And I want us to go back to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So the timing of the rapture in comparison to the tribulation. Paul taught about the rapture in 1 Thessalonians 4, 1 Corinthians 15. Jesus in John 14, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. So Jesus, many feel that was a reference to the rapture. And some hold to a pre-tribulation rapture. And that's what I hold to unapologetically, that believers will not go through the tribulation. They will be raptured out first. Others hold to a mid-trib, which instead of, so at the 3.5 year point, middle of 7 years, the rapture occurs. And then there are those that hold to post-trib, and where believers who go through the entire tribulation be raptured out at the end, and then pretty much immediately have to come back because of the second coming. And 2 Thessalonians 2, we noted in some other studies, verse 2, that they were shaken. The Thessalonian believers were alarmed. They were disturbed. They were confused. They were troubled. They were worried because they thought, verse 2, the day of Christ was at hand. The day of the Lord had come. They had been taught that the rapture would come first. Someone had told them, and we're not really sure who. Paul doesn't know, by word, by letter, by spirit, that someone had misled them into thinking that they were in the middle of the tribulation. The tribulation had started. And so, I'd mentioned this before, but I think it's important to keep in front of us. If they had believed that they were going to go through the tribulation, there would be no alarm, there would be no worry about missing the rapture. They would not be concerned. They would not be shaken. They would not be troubled. But the very fact that they were troubled because they thought they were in the day of the Lord means they had been taught that they would be taken out of that the rapture would take place ahead of time. And I think that's a really strong argument of a pre-tribulation rapture. And so then Paul wants them to know, the day of the Lord has not come. And here's how you know the day of the Lord has not come. And he gave them 2 signs, if you will. Don't be deceived, verse 3. Let no man deceive you, regardless of what they're saying. They had a vision. You have a fake letter from me. Whatever the source of this is, don't be deceived. The day of Christ is not going to come until these 2 things happen first. There come a falling away. I'm in verse 3 now. Except there coming a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed. So the falling away, or it says a falling away, but it's actually in the Greek, it is the falling away. And then the man of sin. So what do we know about the falling away? First of all, it is different than a general departure from the faith. People have been departing from, you think about Paul writing in 1 Timothy, I think, Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. Demas was one of his guys. Demas was one of his, one of the men that served with him. And so that's an apostasy. He fell away from the faith. So we know that this instance, the falling away, is something that is different than a general departure from the faith that we see that's been around as long as Christianity. It is different. It is connected with the revealing of the Son of Man. The revealing is the manifestation. If I remember right, revealed there is the same word that's used about revealed, Christ being revealed. It's the manifestation. And so this man of sin will be revealed. And then the falling away is also, I believe, and we'll develop this more in the future. I think the falling away, the apostasy, the departure, is also linked in with the lie of verse 11, that they should, for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they shall believe a lie. So who is the man of sin? Or the man of sin, also called the son of perdition, referred to in verses 3 and 4. Verse 4, let's look at that. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So here's someone trying to be God. The man of sin, I believe, is the Antichrist. Paul does not say that. Okay, Paul does not say the man of sin is the Antichrist. But as we go through, and that's where we're going to turn to Daniel here in just a minute, as we go through the Old Testament characteristics of the Antichrist, we will see how it matches. There are features that Paul gives here, and so they're so similar that it's like, okay, it's more than coincidental. They are one and the same person, and I think we'll see that as time goes on. It's going to take a little time. I really want to, we're going to be in Daniel today and next week, but I want us to go to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, and we're going to look at a dream of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, those who are familiar with Daniel, even if you've only read it once, you'll know that there's a number of dreams in Daniel. Daniel's I don't want to say it's a dreamy book, but there's a lot of prophecy in Daniel. There's a lot of dreams in Daniel. And Daniel chapter 2 is a dream of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 7 is a dream of Daniel, and we'll find out that they're very similar. There's one builds upon the other. Chapter 7 builds on chapter 2. Chapter 7 we're introduced to the Antichrist, but chapter 2 we aren't. And yet chapter 2 is important, I believe, for us to understand chapter number 7. So Daniel 2, look at verse 1. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, in his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. His dream goes through verse 11. I'm not going to, we're going to cover a lot of this chapter, but I'm not going to read the whole chapter. We're going to skip different parts. But King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and usually, you think of Pharaoh had a dream and asked if anyone could interpret it. Joseph came and interpreted the dream, remember? And so Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. There was a problem. Anybody remember what the issue was? It's not important if you don't. He couldn't remember the dream. Yeah. So he couldn't remember. So he wanted the dream. He wanted to be reminded of the dream and be told the interpretation. Look at verse number 10. So Daniel chapter 2, verse 10. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter.
Therefore there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth. There is none other that can show it before the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. In verse 12, for this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Okay? The king's like, all right, you're not going to do it, off with your head. And of course, Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach were also part of the king's council at this time. Daniel gets the news, fast forwarding, and he's told what's going to happen. He says, give me some time. And then look at verse number 19. So chapter 2, verse 19. So now the dream is revealed. The first part of the chapter was the dream was escaped from. You wanted to know their interpretation. Now we're looking at briefly the dream is revealed to Daniel. Verse 19, then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. 22, he revealeth the deep and secret things. And then jumping ahead to verse 26. So he lets them, the head honchos know, Arioch, in verse 25. And so Arioch brings Daniel in before the king. In verse 26, the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, that was his Babylonian name, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king, but there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. So Daniel, we really see his humility and his desire to give the credit to God. He's not taking the credit for himself. There is a God in heaven that reveals secrets. Daniel's like, I'm just a vessel. I'm just giving you what God has given me. Don't look at me, look at God. And there's a God in heaven, verse 28, that reveals secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream. So notice, what shall be in the latter days. All right, so Daniel's letting him know this is a dream that has far-reaching impact. The interpretation of this is not just immediate, it affects end-time things. The latter days was, I think that phrase, latter days, phrase, 2 words, is used a number of times in the book of Daniel, and it refers to end times type events. And then, thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for these, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, so again he's emphasizing, don't look at me, I'm the messenger. Praise the one who has the wisdom. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have, more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. And so he says, first of all, he gives him the dream. Starting with verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. Magnificent or awesome is more the idea of not terrible, like repulsive, but it was awe-inspiring. We aren't told what
okay, it's an image of what? It sounds like the image of a person as you read through this. And I find it interesting that after this, Nebuchadnezzar made an image that he wanted worshipped. That's not something we're going to spend any time on, but it's, I guess as I was reading and studying this, I'm like, well, I wonder if he patterned it after what he remembered in the dream later. I don't know. But the image, verse 32, the image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. So here's Daniel giving him, here is what you saw in your dream. And then verse 34, thou sawest, or you were seeing, till that a stone was cut out without hands. So a stone that just appeared. It wasn't a stone that was cut out of the rocks. It was a stone cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and break them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floor, and the wind carried them away, and there was found no place for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So we have this vision of a dream of an image that has a head of gold, chests and arms of silver, belly and legs of brass, and then iron legs and feet, mixture of clay and iron. And then the stone comes and smashes this image. Stone becomes a great mountain and fills the whole earth. So that's the dream. Like, what does that mean? Well, thankfully, and there are, I'm sure people could have a heyday with making that become whatever they wanted to, but God interprets it for us, largely. There are some gaps we have to fill in, but we have the interpretation. Verse 36, this is a dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. Daniel's reminding him, you are the greatest king there is right now. But you need to understand, the God of heaven is the one who is making you. He's the one who gave you this kingdom. He gave you the power. He gave you strength. He gave you glory. All these things that you have are because God has given them to you. And verse 38, wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. So he's reminding Nebuchadnezzar of his greatness. And then notice the last part of verse 38. Thou art this head of gold. Okay, you are the head of gold. After thee, verse 39, shall arise another kingdom. So we have some clues here. The head of gold is a kingdom. You are the king with that kingdom. After thee shall arise another kingdom. So the other part of the image refers to a kingdom. And another, I'm still in verse 39, another third kingdom of brass. So we're already seeing that this image is that these different parts of this image equate to kingdoms. Daniel's very plainly saying that. You're the head. You are a kingdom, and then there's another kingdom that comes after, a third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. So we know that this vision is about 4 kingdoms. We know it starts with Babylon. Thou art the head of gold. The next king, and I don't expect you to know this, but the next kingdom that came after, turn to Daniel 6, verse 8. Daniel 6, Daniel's thrown into the lion's den. Keep your finger here in chapter 2 if you think of it. But Daniel 6, verse 8 helps us see who the next kingdom is. They tricked, they came up with a way to, we were actually just talking about this. They could not find a way to trap Daniel as far as doing right goes. Daniel did right. So the only way they could make Daniel get in trouble with the king was to come up with a law that was unlawful for Daniel, and then Daniel would break it. He wasn't supposed to pray he had to pray to the king for the next 30 days. And Daniel's like, no, I'm praying to God like I always have been. But Daniel 6, verse 8, now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. So the point is, Babylon was the first kingdom. Medes and the Persians were the second kingdom. So we know from the book of Daniel, there's 2 of the kingdoms right there. You study this out, other Bible commentators. The third kingdom, so we're back in Daniel 2, verse 39. The third kingdom, the kingdom of brass, was Greece. They were the next world power. And this is not even necessarily Bible. This is just history. There was a Babylonian empire. There was a Medes and Persian empire. The Greeks, Alexander the Great, followed them. And after Alexander the Great was Rome. And you think of when Christ was born, Rome was in power. Rome was the world power at that time. And so the fourth beast, the fourth kingdom, verse 40, was Rome. Verse 41, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, so that's why I say this is, the image was like a person. You got a head, you got shoulders, you got legs, and you got toes. Whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry or common clay. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. End of verse 43, they should not cleave one to another. The iron and the clay didn't hold together good. Now verse 44. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. In the days of these kings. What kings?
Fifth kingdom. That would be the fifth kingdom.
The fifth, right? Yeah. The 10 toes, which are the 10 kings. So excellent. Yep. It's not in Nebuchadnezzar's time, not Babylon, not Medo-Persians, not Greece. These kings, when he was just talking about the toes, in the days of these kings.
So would those be the empires of the world?
Well,
that are going.
Yeah, they're what we and based on this, okay. So the things we know for sure. I mean, we know it's Babylon. We know it's Medo-Persia. We know it's Greece. We know it's Rome. And the 10 toes are connected to the Roman Empire. So many believe, and based on this, that there's going to be a rekindling, a kind of an alignment of 10 kingdoms in that part of the world. European Union, whatever you want to call it, but there's going to be something over there that is going to come together I don't know that I've read, and as we get into this a little more, maybe I'll find that. I don't know that they've necessarily listed who they think the 10, but there's that part of, you got Rome's, Italy and Spain and France and, all those. I'm going to show my lack of geography here, but anyway, there are 10 countries in proximity over there that, from that part of the world. But the thing I want us to not miss here is that in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And so there's going to come a time when there's going to be this union of 10 kingdoms. Somehow that part of the world, because it's connected to Rome, and during the time when they are together, when they are destroyed, God sets up his kingdom. So the millennial reign of Christ, part of preceding that will be a breakup of these 10 kingdoms. And so, of course, these 10 kingdoms will have to be together for sure during the tribulation. In order for them to be broken up at the end, for Christ to set up his reign, that they will come together sometime during the tribulation. So we are going to end with that. Next week we're going to look at Daniel 7. So I would encourage you, if you have time, you think of it, read Daniel 7 for next week. And then after you read Daniel 7, you go, wow, that's kind of cool. That's like Daniel 2. I'm going to go back and read Daniel 2 again. Do that. That's good. But read the two of them, and Daniel 7 talks about, I'll give you a segue. I'll give you a tease. What's it called, a tease? Not a trailer, but whatever. Anyway, in Daniel 7, there are 4 beasts.
Yeah.
Not an image of, but you will be surprised to see how much they correlate back and forth between Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. Of course, Daniel 7 is where we meet the Antichrist. He's not brought up here, but in Daniel 7, it kind of fleshes out more of this vision, fills in some of the blanks, and then we find out more things about the 10 kingdoms. Antichrist is actually a little horn, is what he turns out to be. Any questions that I probably can't answer, but I'll certainly write them down so that I can look them up.
I would have never got all that out of the reading of Daniel.
Daniel's an incredibly prophetic book. I mean, it really, and my hope is that we're going to see how Daniel fits in with 2 Thessalonians and how Revelation will fit into Daniel and 2 Thessalonians. We kind of tie all those together. And what I'll probably do at some point is maybe come up with a chart so you'll be able to look at it at a glance. Okay, Daniel 2 says this, Daniel 7 says this, 2 Thessalonians says this, Revelation says this. You can kind of see it all the way across. So.
Like Schofield relates it all back and forth to each other.
Right.
I'm sorry I was jumping.
No, that's okay. If you find anything I'm goofing up, let me know. I've been looking at my Ryrie Study Bible for some hints. So, all right, good. Why don't you can go ahead and shut that off then.
Oh, you're going to tell people about your
Boy,
Saturday?
I can invite everybody for Saturday.
Okay, Saturday here at the church at 10 o'clock. The date of Saturday, for those of you that don't know, is 10/10/20. 10/10/20. At 10 a.m., there is going to be a presentation, a military presentation, is that right? To both Art and Don, right? Sharon made something for them, and so if you're not doing anything Saturday at 10 o'clock a.m. here at the church, 10 o'clock sharp. If you come at 10:01, you'll be late. No.
We'll put the coffee on.
The coffee will be on. All right. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.